very much. Awesome. So I want to introduce you to David MacNeal. What's your actual title?
Digital content editor.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Digital content editor for RV Pro magazine. We talked a little bit about RV Pro on Tuesday, about them being a trade publication and the difference between trade and consumer publications. We're going to set this up as an interview because David doesn't spend his time doing public speaking, and this way we can sort of make sure that we cover all the stuff that I want to make sure you guys get. We're going to have a cup of tea while we're chatting. It's hardly a proper tea ceremony, but we'll do the best we can. There you go, sir. So, I know that all of you have been asking, and I promised I would let you know, I apparently do have to have surgery on my arm. So I don't know when that's going to be, but I will let you know. And if we do have to cancel class at any point, I will make sure that I send you the online version of that lecture so you don't miss anything important. Yes, ma'am?
What should we keep in mind when taking our notes?
Well, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff that we've covered. So I want you to practice taking notes for starters, because it's an essential part of any writing type job. And I don't know, everything he says is going to be fascinating and important. Yes, sir.
Is like just full name so we know it?
Yeah, would you write your
sure.
name on the board?
Sorry.
There's chalk over there.
Yeah, it's gonna look like serial killer writing.
Well, it won't be worse than me writing with my left hand, so.
This is
And I
evil.
did put it in your,
Like the announcement?
in the announcement, because I thought it would be something that you would like to have. But yeah. Good, excellent, thank you. So the first thing I want to ask you is just to tell us a little bit about what your job is. What do you do in this industry?
Sure. So primarily I kind of act as a web editor. And just kind of like daily task is to prepare a newsletter every morning. So I come in at 8 sharpish and yeah, just comb through press releases and clean them up. Yeah, make the headlines just pop and basically just try to get as many email opens as possible, which fortunately, like, we have a really high rate at RV Pro. And so, yeah, the RV Pro is a trade publication, and it's a business to business. So if you, for instance, like in the RV industry, if you make RVs, you might read our magazine just to see what the latest products are, what dealers are up to. Extraordinarily niche, but yeah, there's a publication for almost everything. So
Yeah, we talked a little bit about trade publications and how they differ from consumer publications
Right.
last week in preparation for you.
Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, after I do the daily newsletter, I generally, watch the Google Analytics to see which story is trending the most. Then select the top 3 and then go to Facebook and TweetDeck and then prepare those stories for social media by just scheduling post dates so I don't have to worry about it throughout the day. So I schedule the times they'll go up. And then, yeah, the rest of the day is just kind of advancing like innovative ways for RV Pro to get more traction, beat our competitors. And usually that's done through finding ways to do different videos, galleries, interviewing different sources for web exclusives, so our stories stick out from the competitor. And then at the same time now I have this new kind of task where we recently launched a weekend edition of our newsletter. And in that, I kind of curate content from various bloggers, mostly marketers. There are some people in the industry that want to blog for us, write column-style stories. but mostly they're just market people trying to advance their companies, promote their company's product. But, you know, I kind of just like guide them beforehand, like telling them, you know, not to mention your brand throughout the piece and like just make it more accessible. And together, yeah, we curate this content that's actually doing pretty well and gaining, you know, yeah, some steam and all that. So
Well, that's good.
yeah.
What did you do to prep for this? Like, where did you go to school? What kind of background did you put together? I know that it's not necessarily the standard way that everybody does it, but what was your track to this position?
Honestly, they took a chance on me. I mean, my background is, so I went to school for journalism with the idea of becoming a magazine journalist. And I did for a while, like writing for Wired magazine regularly, and then outdoor, and I mean, just like a bunch. But then like freelancing kind of sucks. Like you spend all this time on like pitches and then they don't, you know, get picked up necessarily by the publication you want. So yeah, freelancing is a lot of work, and if you have the tenacity to do that, I highly recommend. But I imagine the majority of you are going into communications, like kind of, I don't know, marketing, social media kind of stuff.
That PR, we have people
PR,
interested in PR, people interested in different kinds of writing. Some people want to do sports journalism. So we have a really wide variety
Oh, nice.
of, this particular class has a really wide variety of things that people want to do.
Excellent. Well, may I ask, I mean, who's interested in doing some kind of like magazine or newspaper journalism? Anyone along those lines? Yeah? Cool.
What about broadcast journalism?
Broadcast? Very cool. Nice. And I'll say this, I mean, like, regardless of what you're thinking for your career path as a journalist, become a good writer. Read stories you like and write stories you like. Because through writing, you'll gain more confidence in the type of voice that you have, your own narrative voice, which is the most important thing. It took me a few years to get there, and I got there by kind of like emulating people that I really liked, but you can't help but inject yourself into your own writing. If you're trying to not copy someone else, but you know, there are certain writers that just speak to you, and there's a reason why. That's kind of your voice coming out. So become a good writer, and through writing, I was actually, you know, for magazines, I was actually able to get a book deal with St. Martin's Press, which that lasted, the writing and the research took 2 years of that, doing travel, it was a lot of fun, and then it got released July 2017.
Can you tell them about the book?
Oh yeah, it's called Bugged, The Insects Who Ruled the World and the People Obsessed with Them. I was a finalist for the Colorado Book Awards, but then this like really good book beat me out about like forest fires and like people dying and braving, like doing tremendous things. So bugs versus like heroes, I get it. But it was really cool. Like I highly recommend talking to some professors at Boulder too. Those guys, just the insight, like a journalism for environmental stuff especially. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So yeah, I wrote the book, and as I was finishing the editing process, I realized I needed a job. And you know, I got the galleys, and once I got to the galleys, I was like, galleys are proofs that, you know, basically before you go to print. I was like, okay, I need work. And so I really wanted to expand my horizons with, you know, multimedia journalism, and that's how I came across this opportunity at RV Pro. And they took a chance on me, but they did that because of my writing background and just the, you know, the book and articles, all that kind of stuff. And I was an editor for a short time at a regional magazine called Yellow Scene.
That's a local Denver, Boulder, Front Range publication, if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
You guys have no way of knowing this, but we both applied for that job. And one of the reasons that I didn't go forward was I'm useless in the morning. And you have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning and be like
Yeah.
on top of your game. And I knew that that was not gonna be a good fit for me.
No, you made the right
You have to
choice.
you have to make those decisions. You know, I really would have loved to have been working there. On the other hand, if I had taken that job, I wouldn't be here, so you never know.
Yeah, well, I miss 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night.
Yeah, it's, you know,
Oh, God, I miss that.
it's like the career guy when he was here, and he said, you know, he gave you that sort of Venn diagram, what you're good at, but you don't like, what you're good at, but you like, what you're not good at, and you like, and you're not good at, and you don't like. So I would have been good at it, but I would have been miserable.
Yeah.
And so, and then we wouldn't have gotten to meet, so
There.
you never know.
Yeah, and, you know, it was just, yeah, I saw at RV Pro just an opportunity to really innovate. And over 1 year of being there, I managed to double the website views. And yeah, and then like introduce video to the whole company, which RV Pro is owned by National Business Media. National Business Media has 5 imprints, one of them being RV Pro, and then the sister publications are, 4 other different kind of niche markets.
What about, I know they have a printing publication?
Yeah, there's one called Printware, Sign and Digital Graphics, Awards and Engravings, which is very confusing when you see A&E. You think arts and entertainment.
Right.
And then one called The Shop, which is about car detailing.
So that just reminds you of what we talked about on Tuesday. There is truly a magazine for everything that anybody does. Those are fairly niche industries in and of themselves. And if there's one magazine, there's more than one.
Right.
Every single one of those magazines has at least one competitor.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And so, just shows you again how every industry needs a way to get information about its competitors, about what's happening, all of those kinds of things. Could you tell them a little bit about you talked a little bit about what you do day to day, but a little bit about how RV Pro works in the sense of what makes it different from a little bit more about the trade consumer difference?
Yeah.
I know that that's sometimes hard for people to grasp.
Right, for instance, I'll just use our industry as an example. There's one magazine called Trailer Life, and that's geared more towards consumers, like RVers talking about their experiences, and I've never actually picked up an edition of it, but I've seen it online. And so, there's more consumer focused content, which is basically buy this, and then this feature about maybe this person, so on and so forth. People just interested in different destinations to travel to and their means of getting there.
I told them that if you looked at the ads, that was one good way of telling.
Oh, sure.
If they're trying to sell you one thing, it's
Right.
probably a consumer magazine. If they're trying to get you to carry their whole line of stuff,
Yeah.
it's probably trade. So maybe,
Yeah.
you can help them. One of their assignments is to find some trade publications, and then we're gonna query them. So, and we have a question over there.
So compared to your writing for Wired, which seems like very eclectic kind of articles, they're all over the place. What's the difference between doing writing like that versus writing as a single topic for just RV Pro and that kind of just one single field?
Well, great question. You with Wired and you find what the voice is of the magazine and you write towards that. And then you pitch your story ideas towards that. Your ideas will be informed by what the magazine stands for. At something focused like RV Pro, you essentially find stories by taking, I mean, you could just use it for widgets, really. I mean, but in this case, like RV, and you take an exploded view of that. So the battery on it, you know, for the generator or whatever, and like, you know, who makes that battery? Is there a new line coming out? The writing style for RV Pro is very, like, just hard news style. And with business to business, you would, you know, you extract less of yourself from the piece. It becomes more, because you have to think like business to business, you have advertisers that you solely rely on. So you can't really, you know, kind of just crap on them and all that stuff. Like, you can't like completely be honest. You have to work with them a little bit. Not a product review, but a product overview. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, with RV Pro, you focus on little bits here and there. It could be an RV manufacturer, like the person who makes the thing. It could be someone who just focuses on a solar panel. So you have a manufacturer, you have a supplier. Suppliers will send their product to a manufacturer or to the aftermarket, meaning if you were at a dealership, you would go into the store and buy that solar panel. And then there's the dealerships that you also write about. And you write about the dealerships too because the whole idea of the magazine is to make you have a dealership make more money. And that's the majority of our readership, are dealerships and people on the service side of RVs. So whenever you look at any magazine, you just kind of find out like who's picking it up. That's very important. And then, yeah, you look at the ads and you see that, I mean, if you were picking up a consumer magazine, you wouldn't necessarily see just a ad for a hitch or a line of hitches. Like, who gives a crap about that stuff, you know? Or like a certain suspension, whatever, thing coming out. Consumers don't really care about it. So, yeah, I don't know, like, are you thinking about magazine journalism or?
Kind of. I'm not interested in broadcast. I was interested in just writing because that's what seems most enjoyable.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that like when getting involved in something like a trade magazine versus something like writing for Wired.
Right.
Wired, you have articles related to bug bento boxes,
Mhm.
and I don't know. Did you actually eat one?
Oh, I ate a lot of fucking bugs
Okay,
for
yeah.
the book, but.
But versus something like RV Pro, I just want to see it, or genuine interest in like, does it get stifling writing for one
Yeah.
particular, I mean, just RVs in general, or versus having that creativity of like, I don't know if Wired gave you actual topics or every article you wrote was just your own interest. And
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. It 100% does. And then you start to see like but that's when I kind of like, in my time as an editor, which has only been 2 years, but in my time I've seen like which articles work. And I know that when I was doing original content for the for the website, it was to just kind of be diverse and like get our numbers up. But then I started to realize that what people are responding to are how the headlines are written, how the stories are concise. And I now save my writing, my reporting for stories that I think are actually really, you know, kind of compelling for the industry anyway. Having said that, I am good at my job. Like but it is, end of the day, a paycheck. And I am so thankful that I get to do like 8 to 5, and that's it. Like, I don't take it home. I don't get emails on my phone or anything like that. I do my, work within that time, and it's fantastic because then I get to go home and work on what I'm really, passionate about. And so, getting back to your question, it can feel stifling doing that, but be good at that. Be good at, you know, if you want to go into journalism, I highly recommend going into digital, but being an excellent writer. And then afterwards, just come home and then like write your pitch for, you know, Wired magazine or whatever magazine, and slowly make your way towards that. At least like, if I could, you know, kind of do things over again, I would have like focused, done what I'm doing now, which is get a job, just 9 to 5, digital, and then slowly gravitate towards doing that magazine writing. So yeah, in the state of journalism today, it's so hard to find a job where you're going to love it, but absolutely try. And like start, if you know what you want to do, just start doing it now. Like, not for this class, but like for other classes, if your grades start to dwindle because you're allocating time to doing what you love, it might be okay, I don't know. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but at the end of the day, at a resume, you're not putting your GPA on there. You're just putting your accomplishments. So, yeah, just do.
I have some more questions.
Yeah.
So you kind of discussed this idea of like kind of adjusting your writing style for depending on like the people you've worked for.
Right.
How do you find that difficult for yourself? Because you said that on your spare time you kind of do your own thing,
Yeah.
you kind of develop your own ideas. But do you find it very difficult to have to like alternate? Because obviously that might include like vocabulary or method of like.
Absolutely. I mean, like, you hit the nail on the head. It takes practice. You know, right now, instead of, my next book is not going to be nonfiction. I decided, and I talked about it with my agent, and he's cool with it. So, like, that's awesome. But I'm going to do fiction for the next book. So I come home, or you know, I go to work, and I'm writing in this like very kind of like stiff, hard news kind of like voice using AP style guide. Associated Press style guide. And then when I come home, I'm breaking myself free of that. And to differ between the two, I mean, that just takes time and practice, but it's not, hone in on what your voice is, and then just, you know, at the same time, read other different, you know, styles out there. Newspaper, New York Times, you'll see, has a different voice from like USA Today.
And that's gonna be true no matter what you do. You guys see that, I'm sure. Different professors have different requirements, and that's a little bit like working with an editor. You have to write what you wanna say, but you also have to do it within the format that you've been given,
Yeah.
which is very much like working for the voice of an editor. Some professors are very sticky about some things and care less about others. Some professors are, you know, you all know, you work with different professors all the time, and you know that what will fly in this class won't fly in that class, and what this professor requires, that professor doesn't care about. And that's actually really good practice for working with editors, because they're very, very similar. In the final analysis, what the editor says is news, and what the professor says is acceptable, and there's often very little room for discussion about that. I mean, ideally, you'll create a relationship with your professors where you can argue your point in the same way that you'll create a relationship with your boss, where you can say, well, I really think that we'd be better off if we approach the story from this direction. But in order to say that, you have to know what direction you're going to approach the story from. When we talked about the basketball story, and we looked at we just had an idea about writing a story about a high school basketball team.
Sure.
And when we talked about it, we said, well, are we writing about the kid who sat on the bench all season and now is gonna get to play because they're playing against a championship team that they know they're gonna beat? Or are we writing about the best player that everyone's been writing about all year? And if so, what new can we say about him? So if you want to present a different approach, you're gonna have to have given it some thought. And that's gonna depend on your interests. I like to write about the underdog, so I'm much more likely to go with the kids who are the third string, why are they there? Like, they never play. What are they doing? What makes them go to practice and work just as hard as everybody else and never get to pick up the ball? To me, that's much more interesting than the guy who's the first string quarterback or the first string violinist or whatever it is that everyone's always talking about. So for each of you, that's gonna be different. And so you have to figure out that as you go along and find a way to make that work for your professor now and your editor down the road. And when you talk about be a good writer, I mean, that's obvious when you wanna say, I wanna go into journalism or I wanna go to communications. Step one, learn to write. What are some of the things that you mean when you say, be a good writer?
Oh, man. I think primarily, know how to tell a story. News, hard news, you have the inverted pyramid. Feature stories, you just have more of a cinematic way of kind of telling the story, or at least an opportunity to. What do I mean by good writing? To me, I think that means showing command and being able to kind of exude confidence in your writing. And I think a big thing, I don't know, that's tough. It's because it's just through practice and like.
What are some of the practical things you can say to them? One of the things that I notice sometimes is that people who get very interested in the content sometimes overlook the mechanics and how, just a reminder maybe of how to combine those two.
Oh, God.
We can come back to that.
Yeah, I almost want to say I remember Hunter S. Thompson, he would copy books. He was probably on mescaline or something, but he would take a whole novel and in his spare time just rewrite it word for word, just to know what good writing felt like. And that this is what it feels like, I'm reading it in this book, but here it is on this typewriter in front of me and I'm pushing the buttons. And I think that's a very interesting thing because what he was also noticing is the different style and the voice of the person and the punctuation and the way sentences are kind of thrown together. I'm not an English major, I can't tell you what certain, what certain terms mean and all that stuff, but I know what it is, through writing. I know how the sentence is supposed to be structured.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned something a few minutes ago about one of the ways that a trade magazine works. It's also true about many consumer magazines, but the idea that you're in some ways beholden to your advertisers, but you also want to maintain your editorial integrity. So you said you wanted to do not a review, but an overview. So can you explain to them, first of all, what each of those things are and why you want to do one rather than another?
Sure.
Thanks.
A review, let's say you have, let's say a video game review. You play the game, the publisher, which they're gonna send it out to, the game publisher, they're gonna send it out to all the media outlets. Just to get it in front of people, written word about it. So, a game review will say, well, this is the pros and cons to this game, and you should buy it or shouldn't buy it. Either way, they're kind of giving it press, which is great. An overview will kind of be like a preview of the game. They won't pass judgment on the thing, they won't say what's wrong with it. They'll say maybe a little bit of how it felt, but you're kind of just giving an overview. In this game you have a character named Mario, and he jumps, and he can grow in size, and he can shoot, fireballs when he has this certain power-up. An overview or a review is saying, the jump didn't feel right, the fireballs are too easy against enemies, and all that kind of stuff.
That's a very good explanation, because you
Pull
want
that
to
out.
make sure that you are acknowledging that they're out there.
Yeah.
Without actually saying, do this, buy this, have this. 1, 2.
So has it kind of like just become objective? Like
Yeah,
you have no
Yeah.
view, but you're just giving an insight to what it is?
yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of more like saying, they serve this at this restaurant, as opposed to, this is the best guacamole I've ever had.
And this is because you want to remain very objective, like overall with a story, and not pass judgment, because it is a niche market. It is smaller, so your advertising base is smaller. Like who is going to show up in this magazine is going to be much smaller than, say, if you're, a massive publication where people are fighting to get in, and like, well, these are our rates and all that stuff, and it's like, oh, okay. So if, going back to that video game analogy, if a game gets a bad review, Nintendo's not going to stop sending them, game demos or, early releases. They're going to keep sending them the stuff because they have a voice in the media, in the public. So,
That was kind of similar to my question was, do you find having to be overly positive or just, not fanatical, but maybe something like, very generous in your compliments?
Yeah, it's good.
To, as opposed to like, say you had a bad experience with something, or are you ever told or asked not to showcase the bad parts,
Yes.
especially for a trade magazine?
Absolutely. For instance, this week, there was a lot of bad news about this one manufacturer. And there's probably like, I think 2 news pieces that we put out into the newsletter this week, or last week rather, that weren't very, didn't cast them in a good light. And there was a 3rd piece of bad news that came out, but we decided not to run that. We gave them a little break. And so we ran instead, I think the next day they sent something positive about their company or whatever, a new product or whatever that they were launching. And so we put that into the newsletter. So you do have to strike a balance, because you do, at the end of the day, you have integrity. Like, people are not gonna get your magazine if it's just advertorial bullshit. Like, if it's a bad product and you're writing, like, saying these exuberant, like, wonderful things about it, people will stop reading you. So, like, when it comes to a bad product or something that's kind of just crappy, maybe we don't write about it. Yeah.
And I think people notice that because it's such a small industry, each trade magazine is covering a small area, so people know who the main players are. And if something comes out and the media is silent about it, that says something also, because they go, oh, all right, I have to walk this balance between, we need these guys to stay as advertisers, and we have to maintain our journalist integrity, and sometimes silence is just as loud as anything else.
Right.
The fact that we didn't write about this thing, now obviously if the 3rd thing that had come out was life-threatening, like their brakes don't work,
Right.
you'd have run it.
There's editorial judgment, that's what
Right, and that's what I meant, like,
Yeah.
even though there were 2 bad things already, and you might have been inclined to give them a break, if the 3rd thing that came out was really important, you'd have run it.
Absolutely.
Because you have to. And they understand that,
Right.
So it's important to see, to see how you make those decisions. So we talked a little bit about what makes a good writer. What makes a good editor? I know I'm just full of hard questions today, sorry.
Organization. Key amongst all is being dependable and being fair. I'll use my current editor as an example. He doesn't really tell you what to do, he kind of lets you come to the conclusion, coaches rather. And I find that works best with the writers I maintain also. for our newsletter. Like I kind of coach along and just ask questions. One thing I love for organizing, and I highly recommend, getting into it, if you find yourself like juggling a bunch of tasks, is Trello. Does anyone use Trello at all?
I've never heard of it.
It's awesome, and actually I got
Could you
our,
just write it on the board?
oh sure.
Okay, know what you said.
I got our entire editorial team on it, and can anyone see that?
TRELLO. No, I think you're sitting in front of it
Yeah.
from that angle.
Sorry.
So what does it do? How does it work?
It works by like you kind of create. It's this great organization system where you have, let's say, one task you want to complete, and so you create, I think what's called a card or a bookmark or something like that. I forget what it first one's called. The rest are called cards. So let's say June issue of RV Pro. You have all the articles listed out, individual cards, you have a date assigned to it, you have a member assigned to it, so they are aware of any updates to it. You have a checklist of things that need to happen, contacts with whomever's in the story, first draft turned in, photos, copy editing, proofreading, and then it is sent down to the designer and they pageant, the magazine. But Trello just helps you give an overall of like what could be this into a very concentrated thing. And I use it also for a game company I co-own. We have two projects, one a mobile game that we're now putting out to publishers, and a new video game we're about to pitch one publisher. And so for those projects, we just have multiple things going on. Like we just have programmers, artists, designers, and a way of keeping track of everything is through Trello. And no matter what industry you're in, it's just a lifesaver, organizing.
I have to check that out.
Yeah.
It looks really cool.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
you're looking at it now? You're just checking it
Yeah,
out?
it's to like make school group work go insanely easier.
Oh my God, 100%.
Playing
Anything's
phone
better than
tag.
Canvas.
And you just have to be good about whoever downloads, if people on your team download it, just get the app and you'll get alerts and all that stuff. So people will just, over time get used to it.
And so does that mean also then that, like with the game company, the programmers don't have to see anything that's not directly related to them if they don't want to?
I mean,
You
yeah,
can divide it, like you could see it if you wanted to, but if that's your thing, you follow that and you don't have to be distracted by all the other, like the other deadlines and the artwork and the whatever else is going on.
absolutely.
So that seems helpful.
Yeah, and then, you just move, it's really satisfying too. You can move cards over, let's say you have a column that says done, and you just, I don't know, it's a bit of a rewarding experience too.
I love checking stuff off when I'm.
Yeah.
Hello. I had a quick question. So what are some weaknesses that you had in the beginning as a new journalist until and some strengths that you have overcome?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna repeat that question because she's a little further back.
Sure.
So what weaknesses did you start out with that you've overcome? Good question.
I think revisiting my old work is painful.
Yeah.
The weaknesses. I think the biggest one was just realizing that I could. Anything I want to do, I can. That's it. I think the biggest thing I did that I wish I would do over again is just focusing on wanting one specific thing and just becoming obsessed with that rather than doing that on the side while also following other, pursuits. I'll say that my organization has become a lot better and that my pitch letters are very strong. And whether it's PR or journalism, getting your pitch down is huge. Absolutely,
That is the
so
next
important.
Can you tell them how how you construct a pitch. That is their next assignment.
Oh,
Like,
shit.
what are the processes that you go through as you're preparing to create a pitch?
Well,
And if
there's
I
yeah.
didn't let you answer your question.
Well, no, I was just gonna ask, I mean, this is like the first thing I do is, who's the pitch for?
Right, so in this case, the pitch is for the trade publications that I made them find.
Oh,
So
okay.
I suggested that they find something that they find at least a little bit interesting,
Okay,
so we're talking about trade publications, and just any thoughts about how you go about creating a pitch that works.
so, whomever you're pitching, study that publication. Read several articles and kind of understand like the type of stories they like to tell, the type of stories that get promoted. Voice is the biggest one, the kind of language they use. Yeah.
You know, this is something that I personally struggle with, but how do you go from like a feature story or article to like hard news?
Ah,
Because
okay,
I think it's easier or more relatable to write feature
yes.
and hard news I just can't.
Well, and that's, you find out who you are, what kind of stories you want to tell, or you as a storyteller. My editor, Brad, he is through and through a dogged journalist. Like he does hard news. There's a kind of rush from like breaking a story and being the first to tell it, versus someone who takes a more narrative approach and adds color to a story, more creativity. One's not better than the other, but one is gonna make you feel better. Yeah. I'm sorry, and what was your kind of question, like what's the
I guess
difference,
I
like
would
going
say
from hard
is
to feature?
If you feel stronger about writing in more of a feature style, but need to have more of a harder angle, or write a feature article, but you still want it to be hard news, because I was reading that a lot of hard news now has a lot of feature elements because it
Yes.
makes it more interesting.
Yes.
But still having that hard news sort of aspect.
Right, and it's a smart thing that, publications are doing now, because hard news, I feel, is eventually gonna get replaced by kind of like AI. There's one article on Wired that was written by a robot, which was just really compelling. And so you are gonna have to inject a bit more color into those hard news stories. But you are still, for hard news, using the inverted pyramid, because people still do have time, like one thing on like Medium, that website Medium is saying, it says how many minutes is it gonna take me to read this article. A feature story, you allow yourself more time to get into it. You're okay with doing perhaps like an anecdotal open. If you were to report on a fire, you can approach it in two ways. You could write about, fire, smoke was reported at so-and-so time and so-and-so location, and people arrived here, so many people are injured or dead, blah, blah, blah. Or you could take the approach of feature style, which is maybe like pick out one person, like a child sits on a curb and looks around and whatever kind of melodramatic thing you want. So yeah, if you're gonna do hard news but with a feature kind of like colorful element, if the publication allows that, go for it. I tried doing that at RV Pro at the beginning, and this goes back to the kind of like finding the right voice. And my editor was like, too much adjectives, color, and got rid of that. And so yeah, I adapted.
Well, just to clarify, because isn't like hard news like more fact, like oriented?
Oh,
Versus like, because in the reading, it's like a feature story, it's more to kind of break away from what's going on, so give the reader like a break from all the intensity that's going on.
Absolutely. You get deeper and more personal with perhaps characters involved if they are.
But feature stories still have to be based
Yeah.
in fact, otherwise we're no longer writing news, we're writing fiction. But you can make, it's almost like the difference between a documentary and a docudrama, right? You have, your documentary is bound entirely to unemotional, my input is as invisible as possible, and my film student can correct me if I'm wrong, but docudrama gives you the opportunity to maybe recreate what you think happened, add a little bit more opinion, as long as you can back that up in some way, or you can find somebody to say, yes, this is what happened, or no, that's not what happened. So you have that, you're still fact-based, it's not like we're writing a movie based on a novel, but we have a lot more space. Documentaries, although I know some documentaries can be endless, they tend to be a little bit shorter because they're sticking to that kind of, tend to be more chronological. And then you've got, you know, this happened, this is the most important thing, and this is how we got here. And with a docudrama or with a feature story, you can start anywhere in the story and work your way around to whatever you think is the most important thing, but you're still basing it all on facts. Does that make sense? I saw some questions over here.
This is kind of off from that, but you say you watch Google Analytics and stuff for what works and what doesn't, and that you've like doubled website numbers and everything. So in a trade publication specifically, do you see that people go towards the hard style, or is there still an appreciation for feature?
It depends on the feature, you know.
Like if it's a hot button topic or something?
Yeah, hot button, something people can relate to. For instance, more recently, the biggest, or you know, a feature story that's gotten a lot of traction is the two-part kind of like series we did on dealers who survived the Great Recession. And so those are gonna get a lot of clicks. It depends on the company, it depends on, it really, when it comes to like a feature that, you know, is really popular, it usually depends on the company or the people, or, you know, if it bleeds, it breeds,
Yeah.
basically, you know?
And for doubling the website numbers,
Yeah.
like, how did you do that? Did you integrate like other
Yeah,
things? Or?
yeah, like, well, we weren't properly doing SEO at the beginning. Search engine optimization, which, I mean, whether you're PR or journalism, that is gonna become such an important thing. And so, you know, just read up on it, and you know that, I mean, Google's algorithm changes frequently, but there are certain practices with SEO that are just kind of mainstays. But yeah, it was a bit of knowing what people are gonna like, delivering news in a timely manner. I think the prior editor would ballpark, like our newsletter goes out at 10:30 on the dot. He would get it around 10:30 to 10:50. So if you're not dependable and reliable, you're gonna lose people. But if you remain consistent, if your headlines are sharp and attractive, while still being like hard news kind of headlines, it's just gonna work more in your favor. And so through doing that, through understanding the type of stories people like, the type of length of stories people like, that SEO also likes, really helped us, you know, get there to that point. And I have to say, I mean, like, I really do love the fact that I was able to come into such a small, like, space, because I've been able to learn a lot, experiment a lot, and I don't know if I would be able to gain the kind of insight I have, like I would have had to have gained, if it was like a well-oiled machine that didn't allow for innovation. So I'd say, I mean, like, good God, if you guys could get jobs in the media related whatever now, while you're still in college, I highly recommend it. Because once you graduate, it's gonna be college all over again.
What do you mean by that?
What? And not in the doctor sense. So you learn things in the classroom and then you practice them in real life. And real life is like college all over again. I mean, but this time there isn't a grade, there's, salary involved.
Or school keeping your job.
Yeah, keeping your job, promotions, all that fun stuff.
They look terrifying.
We're like,
But the worst, oh God, but like homework assignments you don't want to do, that's awful. I mean,
It's true, it's true. One of the nice things about your job is that you don't have homework.
that's right.
You are done at 5 o'clock and then you go home. My job follows me around. Students email me at 11 o'clock at night.
Oh my God.
And because of who I am, if I'm up, I will answer them. Which means next time they email me at 11:45.
So it's important to know what you want to do.
Exactly, very important. Go ahead.
Oh, yes.
yeah, I had a quick question. What are some tips on how to interview like a journalist like yourself? So say you, because you have to approach people, right?
Well, I'd say take them to a bar.
Take them to a bar.
Right, it was not an
You're really
option
gonna get all
because
the-
I would probably have to get like some kind of special permission. Some of you aren't even old enough to go to a bar, so we're here instead.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Mhm.
But if you are, do. Just because, I mean, journalists, general rule of thumb, like to drink. And that's why.
Yeah.
Do you say that like as like, is it like loose lips a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, like,
Relaxed.
yeah, it's more relaxed setting. I mean, writers just like to kind of commiserate and like, complain about things. Bar's a good setting for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just, that's actually funny that you met. Is there someone that you wanted to meet or talk to, a specific writer you like, or?
I'm not sure yet. I want to be a broadcaster.
Okay, a certain broadcaster you like that you'd like to talk to?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
But it's a good question.
Well,
Yeah.
but, and I will say that, like, when I was starting off, going back to the whole college, out of college again, I met with several journalists I admired, and I was so thankful because,
Yeah.
like, I remember I was just happenstance, like, in San Francisco before going to this other thing, and there was a journalist I loved that lived out there, and we met up for, meat pie, not, it was during the day, so I hate day drinking. But like, yeah, just talking about his approach to like pitch letters and just storytelling, you gain so much insight from talking to the people you admire.
Right.
And I've done that for Mary Roach, another great author, journalist. She helped me out so much. Same with like Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club. Like I got to talk to him, and like when you meet the people you really admire, I mean, they say don't,
Why?
but if you know they're not assholes
Right,
beforehand.
because sometimes
I'd
when
go
you meet them.
Was he as
they-
weird in real life?
No, well, he's lovely. Oh no, he's not weird at all. Like he's like
read
he was
his
on a
books.
farm and like, oh yeah. I mean, he takes you weird places that I just absolutely love. Well, for instance, I mean, I wrote a short story about 18 and over, right?
Yes, they're all over 18.
Yeah.
They can't drink yet, but they can think.
A furry orgy party.
Oh, boy.
So people in animal costumes and all that stuff, and I sent it to Chuck Palahniuk. And then a year later, I got to interview him for a roundtable interview for Choke. It's coming out in the movie. And I mentioned like, hey, I seen you this story and you had some really good advice. He's like, oh yeah, I suggest you put a real monkey in that one. Or,
Yeah.
but just hearing that you remembered the story, that like you're talking to these people, you kind of take away the, on paper, in a book, in a magazine, on TV, there are these like, oh my God, revered like people. But then when you meet them in person and you hear about their process, you realize they're just like us. They just strive towards something they really loved and never stopped, and kind of just do it when you go home. Like, you have to be obsessed with something.
I have one last question.
Sure.
I'm a PR intern for a nonprofit,
Oh, great.
and as a journalist, what do you appreciate from public relations?
That was the question that I was worried we weren't gonna get to, so
Yeah.
what makes a good press release?
Well, I hate it when words are capitalized that aren't supposed to be.
Right, and this
Like-
is something we talk about a lot. We don't capitalize in the English language for emphasis.
Yeah.
It's not how English works.
They used to do that back in like the
Yeah.
19th
Okay.
century and like
Yeah,
17th, like.
right, but that's
I
not
don't
how
know
English
why.
works.
Oh,
And
but God, no.
please eliminate the exclamation point from your
Yeah.
writing.
That's
Right?
only if someone's shouting at someone,
Okay.
you know? It's a great product.
It's such
Are
a
you
bad habit as a
angry?
woman,
Like if
though.
you're shouting?
We have to seem friendly all the time, or people don't like us.
Well, and then there's like different like connotations. I mean, like different contexts and all that stuff. Like if you're writing an email to someone, it's like, hey, exclamation point. You're not like shouting, hey. If you're texting someone, you know, like whatever it is, like, you know, exclamation points mean a different thing than they do on a press release. If I see them in a press release, they don't get me excited, they get me annoyed.
Okay.
It's just one more thing to clean up and like edit down.
What are the other things
What
you
I
take out?
appreciate though is like someone who emulates this inverted pyramid style. I don't like hyperbole. I don't like other just adjectives like, oh god, the worst is like game changer. No, it's not. Like we could get rid of that. We could get rid of like how a battery is supposed to make me feel. Like, no, the battery does this, this, and this.
So you don't like it to sound too like 1950s salesman?
Take all the fluff out of it. Best in class, game changer, yeah, that's the worst. You know, I mean, give me the news, you know. I don't have time to read everything you have. Like, so if you could give me good quotes, not just basic garbage that's, you know, cut and paste inside there, or, you know, we were really happy with how we, you know, all that kind of stuff. Make them insightful and allow me to learn something within a short amount of paragraphs. Because I'm going to get a lot of press releases, and now I'm going to say, like, I have a couple press releases that are on the back burner because they're gonna take a lot of work to clean up, get ready. So give me information in a short amount of time, and yeah, let me do the rest, you know.
Okay, we have two
Sorry,
more
you-
questions. Go ahead, I think you raised this hand first.
I was gonna say, would you say that also depends on where you're working, what you're working for? Or is that just in all general journalism?
I'd say that's all general,
Yeah.
because you're gonna be sending out that press release to multiple people. Now, what does change is if you know someone. There are some PR people that I have relationships with, and they know the type of stuff I like to see. I don't do that anymore because I don't freelance anymore. But like, when you write a press release, you want it to go out to multiple outlets. So you just kind of like learn the formula that gets it right. Yeah, you really want to promote the product and just keep in mind other people's time. You know, how much time they have, how many things they see a day. Because chances are, I mean, like when I was at the AV club, I was an intern there, and they'd give me like all the music CDs and all that stuff. It's like, you know, with band press releases, it's like, okay, I get it, they're crybabies and all that stuff, and whatever past and history, blah, blah, blah. Is the music good? That's all I kind of care about. And like, are there any upcoming shows? You know, what can I promote? So.
Good, one more question back there.
This is my last question. So, as you know, as we all know, technology is getting better and faster and easier. And as a journalist or as a reporter, how does that benefit you? Or are you kind of like old school and like to just take notes?
That's a good question. I'd say, well, I mean, how many, by show of hands, like how many people here use social media, it's, are on the gram regularly or like Twitter and all that? Yes, yes, yes.
Everybody.
Like every day and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Keep that shit up. I just, it never interested me, and so I am absolute crap with it. But when it comes to promotion for the novel eventually, who knows when the hell that happens, I'm gonna have to like get serious about it. If you have something to share, you want to be social as much as possible. Embrace the social media, but just my advice is like just I don't know, it's just to be a good person. There's so much negativity out there, and with the algorithms the way they are, they kind of like, if like a publisher or if a publication or a person knows it's going to incite this type of thing, like clickbait and all that crap, like we could really do less of that and just more positivity overall. I love Jonathan Van Ness, like from Queer Eye. He is fucking amazing. I recently scrubbed my Twitter feed just because it was like depressing me with the current presidency at all, everything that's happening. And so like the more kind of like just positive vibes you can put out there, I think people are gonna react on that more. Like you'll get more instant reactions with something kind of negative light, but with positivity you could keep people following and just learning and becoming better in general for a longer period of time. So.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Always good to make the guests blush. I just need to turn that off.